Hi folks, this is Meredith from the Papery Craftery, and today we're going to be making Gerbera Daisies, really bright flowers with a lot of small petals. For the petals, I'm going to be using this 2mm wide quilling paper. It's very, very thin. I don't use this often, but it's really great for flower petals. You can see it is definitely smaller than a standard 1/8 inch. It's about half the size. If you don't have 2mm paper, you can cut 1/8 inch strips right down the middle. It takes a while, but it's definitely possible. I've done it many, many times. This paper is from a company called JJ Quilling, which I have found out after filming this video has since closed. You can still find some of their paper online, or you can find different sources for 2mm paper. Any of that will work fine. I am going to be using a little bit of this green 1/8 inch paper, and then I have some 3/8 inch we're going to be including as well. So the example I'm going to make is going to have 3 different widths of quilling paper, but I'll show some demos later about how you don't have to use all those different kinds if you don't want to. You're going to need quilling tool of your choice. Tweezers are going to be helpful. Small scissors. We're going to be doing some fringe work later on. Whatever glue you like to use. I have my Elmer's glue all in my needle nose container. Once you start putting your petals on, if you'd like to use tacky glue, it will definitely make that process go a little bit faster because we do have a lot of petals for these flowers. If you'd like to be really precise in your measuring, always grab a ruler. I'm going to be building my flower on my work board covered in wax paper so the glue doesn't stick. And other than that, if you just have a small paintbrush, that's going to be all you need for this project. Starting off, I'm going to be taking one of my strips of this really thin 2mm paper here. These strips are about 17 inches long or so. I'm going to be using 1 strip per petal. I tear off one end just to make a torn surface where I'm going to finish my roll, because we all know that quilling really likes torn surfaces for a nice smooth gluing area. And then very carefully, I'm going to start rolling this around my needle tool. I mentioned before, you can use whatever tool you'd like. If you prefer the slotted tool, that's fine. An automatic quilling tool will work fine as well, because we're going to be making a lot of these. But it is tricky with this paper being so thin to keep it rolling on itself and not have it grow crooked. So I tend to just kind of get it started on my tool and then just do it by hand. It will take a little bit more time because you're trying to be more precise than with wider strips. It's a little bit more tricky to roll, but this will keep it rolling nice and even. So I rolled it all the way to the end. This is the important part. I'm going to very, very carefully just open my fingers slightly just to get a little relaxation right in the center. I don't want to let this go completely. I just want it to be a little bit open in the center. A little dot of glue, and then push that edge up to seal. Now we're going to be making this into a little marquee shape for our petals, which means making a point on either side. Tight coils, if I didn't let this open up at all, is kind of tricky to get into this shape. You don't have a lot of give to it, and it can really be painful on your fingers, and it's really hard to squeeze. Because we let it open up a little bit in the middle, it's got some area for that paper to move. And that gives you a nice solid petal. See that center hole that we had in the beginning is almost completely disappeared. Gives it a nice solid petal, but it's easier to squeeze. And then I just put a little bit of glue on the underside and wiped it off with my finger. If you have a paintbrush, you could use that as well. You're going to need 16 of these petals for each flower. Now we're going to move on to the center of the Gerbera daisy. And these come in many different colors as well. Sometimes they're bright green, sometimes they're yellow, sometimes they're black even. There's a lot of different variations on these flowers. Center is just like the flower petals. What I'm doing is gluing together 2 different strips to make about 30 inches all together. This is like a spring green color I'm using, and this is back to the 1/8 inch standard quilling strip, close to 3mm if you prefer that measurement. And then this is just a matter of rolling this all the way up, start to finish, and taking it off the roll and gluing the end. So we're just gonna We're going to zoom through this part a little bit because this is just a standard tight coil. Just like before with the really thin paper, sometimes it's easier with really long strips to take it off your tool and roll it up with your hands. So that's what I did there. And then I forgot to do a little torn edge, so let's get rid of that little bit and add a little bit of glue and seal that up. So again, we didn't let this open up at all this time. This is just a standard straight tight coil, but we are going to push the middle up a little bit to get sort of a dome, just to give our flower a little bit more dimension to it. We want to keep that shape intact, so we're going to add a little bit more glue to the underside. And then again, with your finger or with a paintbrush, wipe all that out and it will dry very quickly. We're going to move on to the widest paper we're going to use today, and that is this 3/8 inch paper. If you're, again, working with metric, the closest thing would be about 10 millimeter paper. It will not be exactly the same size, but for this usage, it's not going to really matter. I am going to do a little bit of fringe work on this. I have a whole video about different ways that you can fringe paper. I prefer just to use some small scissors and just do little cuts that go almost to the end. This does take longer than using the machines that they sell for this, but it gives you a lot more control over the size of paper that you're fringing. It also, I don't know, I just didn't have good luck with the fringer. So this is about 6 inches of that widest strip, and I fringed it all the way down. And this is going to go on the outside of the domed center. This is probably a little bit more fringe than I need. I'm going to make a real heavy fringe on this flower. Some of my examples you'll see later have less of a fringe. It's kind of a personal preference situation, but Gerbera Daisies do have a good amount of fringe between the center of their flower and the petals. To attach it, I just added a little bit of glue to the edge of my center dome just to get it started, and then I find it easier to just put some glue on the paper and roll it, and then put more glue on and roll it. Just a little bit more control that way, but just be careful with this part. It's not difficult by any means, but just go nice and slow. It will just take a little bit of concentration to make sure that it's all going on evenly right on top of each other. Once you start with the first full round of fringe, it's kind of hard to see the center anymore because it's sort of covering it. I will just go slow and just get to the end. If you don't like this amount of fringe, you can always do less. That is going to be okay. That last little bit there. And you can see here that this fringe is pretty long. Come on. It really is a lot taller than the center dome. We are going to push that out a little bit, kind of have it falling over the petals. But there are circumstances where you might just think this is just too much and you want to give your fringe a little haircut. That is also okay. This is me pushing it out here, so it's not covering the whole center as much. You can see there's a big difference. Now you can really see that green again. But again, if you don't like that look, give your center a little trim, a little haircut. You can make that shorter, or you can use thinner paper. That is okay too. You can fringe 1/8 inch paper. It's not going to have as long of a look, but it'll still give the fringed effect. So at this point, I'm going to start putting on petals, and there's going to be 2 rows of petals, both with 8. So trying to make this as even as possible, I start off with 1 on either side. If you want to use tweezers, you can do that. If you want to dip into your glue, you can do that. If you want to use tacky glue to make them stick a little bit more quickly, you can do that as well. After I have my 2 on either side, I'm just going to fill in the gaps with 3 more. If you want to use pins to keep these from moving as you're placing your petals, you can do that too. You can put a pin right through the hole in the center, and that'll keep your flower from moving anywhere. Now I have my 3 on that side. And notice the flower petals aren't touching each other. They are just touching the center. That's okay. And then I'm going to put 3 on the other side. And then once I have those ones set, I'm going to let that dry for a little bit. And then I'm going to add a second layer of petals right on top of the first layer. So now it's been a few minutes and I don't feel like my petals are going to move around that much. I'm going to add on the next layer, and we're gluing them similarly, but putting a little bit of glue on the sides, top sides underneath, right where they're going to hit 2 petals below them. We're kind of alternating where the petals are. So instead of putting them right on top of the bottom row, I'm putting them between the 2 below it, and that's going to fill in all the space. This is why I said it didn't matter that the bottom petals weren't touching each other, because now we're putting the top ones right between those gaps with a little bit of glue underneath, and then a little bit of time, and this petal will be all done. Use the rest of your petals to fill in the gaps around the other side. Now our little Gerbera daisy is finished. Spacing out my fringe. If that's too much fringe for you, like I said, use a less wide strip or give your fringe a little trim. This is an example of trimmed fringe. They're not too different. I also have some other different examples here. This one is another 2mm paper, and this time instead of using 3/8 inch wide for the fringe, I used 1/8 inch. You can see it's a lot less noticeable, but it is still there. That is another option. If you aren't able to find 2mm, or you're not ready to purchase new different types of paper, these petals are made with standard 1/8 inch, but I only did 1 layer. So it gets a very similar vibe, but it just doesn't have as many petals. The point is that you can mix and match widths of your paper in the same project to get different effects. But again, if you don't want to invest in many different widths of paper, by all means, you can do these with whatever strips you have and you'll get a similar effect. You want bright petals, you want a little bit of fringe in the center, and then you want a nice dome where it's all coming together. And that is Gerbera Daisies. If you have any questions, leave those in the comment section and I'll answer those as soon as I can. I'll leave links to the video I have about fringe and also whatever supplies you might need for these flowers. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can be around for my next video, and I'll see you then. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.